105 Starbucks stores. In zip codes, Starbucks' own site, models graded as unprofitable. That's the real Magic Johnson business. Not the smile, not the endorsements. The chains saw risk. He saw millions of customers with money and nowhere decent to spend it, and he built a machine for pricing that blind spot. Then he sold the whole thing and bought something far stranger, Undervalued. The business they don't teach you. Start with the failure, because the whole system was built on it. In 1981, still a Laker, Johnson opened a sporting goods store called Magic's 32. By his own telling, he stocked what he liked. $1,500 leather jackets included, and never asked the neighborhood what it wanted. The store was dead within about a year, a six-figure loss. He filed it under tuition. The lesson wasn't stay out of retail. The lesson was the customer is the data. 16 years later, that lesson bought him a piece of Starbucks. After the 1992 riots, investment fled South Los Angeles. Johnson drove the other way. He partnered with Sony to launch Magic Johnson Theaters, and the flagship, 12 screens at the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza, opened June 30th, 1995. That December, he invited Starbucks boss Howard Schultz to a packed opening weekend showing of Waiting to Exhale. Here's Johnson's version. Our biggest screen had 500 women inside, and Howard grabs me about 20 minutes in and says, "Irvin, I never had a movie-going experience quite like this." Understand what that evening actually was. Not hospitality, a live demand demo staged for an audience of one. If you like watching one movie screening turn into a coffee empire, you're in the right place. 3 years later, Starbucks signed a nearly unique arrangement. Urban Coffee Opportunities, a 50-50 joint venture with Johnson's development company, formed in 1998 and referenced in Starbucks' own SEC filings. The skeptics' question was whether these neighborhoods would pay premium prices for coffee. Johnson's answer became the thesis. We'll pay $3 for a cup of coffee. We don't quite know what scones are. So the stores swapped scones for sweet potato pie and pound cake and put R&B on the speakers. Same brand, same espresso machines, different neighborhood intelligence. The venture grew past 100 stores: LA, Harlem, Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, DC. And coffee was one module in a repeating template. He bought burger franchises, around 30 Burger Kings across the South in 2004. He co-branded TGI Fridays restaurants and 24-hour fitness clubs. And then he institutionalized the whole idea as Canyon Johnson Urban Funds, real estate private equity aimed at the same neighborhoods. The third fund closed $1 billion in April 2008, most of it pension money. Here's the mechanic underneath all of it. National chains ran site models built on averages, and the averages graded dense urban neighborhoods as unprofitable. Johnson kept buying exactly what the models rejected. Then, in a single October, he sold nearly all of it. October 18th, 2010, his Lakers stake, bought for $10 million in 1994, went to billionaire Patrick Soon-Shiong for a reported $27 million. 3 days later, Starbucks bought back his half of the 105 stores. The retelling settled on $100 million. Contemporaneous reports said more than $70 million, and Starbucks never disclosed the terms. This has not slowed the retellings down. The point isn't the exact number. The point is what he did with the pile of cash. 18 months later, the answer landed. Guggenheim Baseball Management bought the Dodgers for $2.15 billion, then a record for any professional sports franchise, with Johnson's face on the deal and his personal $50 million check inside it. Forbes puts that check at roughly a 2% slice, and that's been the sports playbook ever since. the Sparks in 2014, LAFC the same year, and the Washington Commanders in July 2023 at $6.05 billion, an NFL record, where his stake is reported at roughly 4%. Small slivers, enormous doors. He supplies the face, the funds supply the money. But the sports trophies aren't the fortune. The fortune is hiding in Iowa. First, the unglamorous middle of the empire. Sodexo Magic, a food service and facilities joint venture with Sodexo, formed in 2006, with Johnson owning 51%, feeds and cleans schools, stadiums, and corporate campuses. Chicago Public Schools alone gave it an $80 million facilities contract across 33 schools in 2014, then another $60 million in July 2018. Full disclosure, the retellings skip. The teachers' union fought those contracts, arguing privatized building management left schools dirtier. That fight is on the record. But notice the shape of the business. Cafeteria contracts don't trend on anything. They renew. In June 2015, he made the real move. He sold Simply Healthcare, his Medicaid-focused insurer, to Anthem in a deal reported around $1 billion, and rolled the proceeds into the least glamorous asset any celebrity has ever bought, a 60% controlling stake in Equitrust, an Iowa life insurance company selling fixed annuities through more than 23,000 independent agents. At purchase, Equitrust managed $16 billion. By the time Forbes ran the numbers in 2023, that had grown past $26 billion. And in October 2023, Forbes made the call. Magic Johnson, billionaire, at $1.2 billion, the fourth athlete ever to get there, with the majority of it sitting in the insurance company. Not the Starbucks stores, not the Dodgers, the annuities. Fortune adds the sharpest footnote. His entire NBA salary came to about $40 million. The empire is 30 times the playing career. If a fortune quietly compounding inside a boring insurance company is your kind of story, subscribe. Undervalued finds one hidden machine a week. Now the honest audit. By 2011, nearly every community-facing asset, the theaters, the Starbucks stores, the Fridays, the gyms, had been sold. He sold the community assets and kept the financial ones. And the theaters he still celebrated for stopped being his years earlier. Control passed through the Sony-Lowe's merger to Lowe's Cineplex, then to AMC, which closed the Crenshaw flagship in June 2010. The name stayed on the marquee longer than the ownership did. It reopened a year later after a $10 million renovation as somebody else's cinema. The demand thesis was right. The theatre business just wasn't where the winnings could live. So here's the mechanic under 30 years of deals. Magic Johnson never out-invented anybody. He noticed that national chains graded neighborhoods on averages, and the averages missed density. Millions of customers with real money and no quality supply. He proved the demand in person, supplied the credibility the brands couldn't buy, and took his cut in equity. Then rotated the winnings into assets that compound without an audience. The 105 Starbucks stores were never the fortune. They were the proof of concept the fortune was built on. Magic Johnson's edge was never fame. It was knowing which spreadsheets were wrong about which neighborhoods. Here's my question, and I actually want answers in the comments. What's a business that's thriving somewhere the big chains still won't build? Drop it below. The best answer might become an episode. Next week, McDonald's. The burgers are the anchor tenant, and the actual business is one of the biggest landlords on earth.